So today, this morning, you already have learned, assimilated quite a lot of information about the economics of mutuality. You have heard about different type of capitals, metrics. What I would like to do here is to guide you through a brief summary of the history of this development of metrics. So this is all about how we made it. So have you heard, as you heard already today, this work is the story of a journey that we started 10 years ago, a journey of research that we didn't do by ourselves. We did it by partnering with several key academic institutions. With some of them, we just shared the beginning of this journey. Some others joined along the way. With the academic partners we have here today with us, we share the entire length of the journey, and they will get into the details of the metrics we are presenting. This journey started with a question, as often starts any scientific inquiry. You have seen this question, I think, at least twice this morning, so it's not new. What I want to stress here is the word right. What should be the right level of profits? Right meaning not less, otherwise the company will not be able to survive, but not more, otherwise we will harm other parts of the ecosystem the company is part of. And if you do that, at the end, it's not sustainable. Somebody else will be harmed as well, and at the end, the entire ecosystem is going to suffer. So for us, it was clear at the beginning that answering to these questions was implying to take a broader perspective, go outside the boundaries of the company, and having a thinking about ecosystems perspective. So if you take an ecosystem perspective, then you need to understand what type of profit are we talking about here. A large ecosystem, different actors, different way to value things. You have monetary values, social capital, and not monetized, natural capital. So what type of profits are we talking about, especially when it's about non-financial forms of capital? Monetary profit is a way to remunerate financial capital. How do you remunerate things which are not financials? So we came up with the idea, what metrics do we need to develop to measure things that traditionally will not be monetized? How we did that? Well, we started with, as usual we do in research, with an open, agnostic, and skeptic mind. We left aside what we knew, what we thought we knew, what we thought it was the right approach, interacting with several academics, taking into account several school of thoughts, theories, models, different approaches to analyze the data, always privileging a pluridisciplinary approach, because the problem of assessing non-financial capital is pluridisciplinary by its very nature. And we did that with one big objective in mind: how can we measure the business performance in an holistic way? Holistic meaning taking into account all the components that made the ecosystem we are part of. Ecosystem is made not only by Mars, by the customers, the suppliers, distributors, end consumers, and the competitors. So I'm going to have a look, a holistic view in that sense. So we broke it down in several steps. One thing we want to look at first is, let's see what happens in our ecosystem. What are the negative externalities that we are producing? And how we can start, by doing due diligence work, start to internalize these negative externalities. Colin Meyer this morning mentioned the idea of redefining profits, talking about sustainable or fair profits, call it as you want. So how we should do that? Well, first, by understand how to measure different forms of capitals in order to understand what are the externalities, negative externalities we are producing, and how we can internalize them, how we can take into account the cost of replenishment, of the maintenance of the capital that we are using and are part of our ecosystem. This is good, but it's not enough. This is what I consider due diligence work. You just clean out the mess you have produced. If you want to be more mutual, we should go beyond just cleaning negative externalities, but produce something that I cannot show, okay. But produce positive externalities. So not only cleaning out the negative stuff, but producing something more. Learn about how to remunerate things beyond financial capital. So natural, social, and human capital. What we want to create is a way to assess mutual benefits within our ecosystem. So if the first one, we call it sustainable profits, this one will be mutual profits, because we are learning how to remunerate other forms of capital. Once we do that, what is the next step? The next step, as Alistair said in his introduction, you can manage only what you can measure. So if we want to manage these externalities, we need to have a measurement. If we want to measure externalities, we need to have the appropriate mutuality metrics. We have to learn how to do that, how to measure, how to remunerate each capital according to its own type. There is a challenge here. And for all the people who, like me, come from academia and then in the business and try to interact with academia to do research, there is always a tension. On one side, we want to be scientifically sound, rigorous, and take into account all the complexity of the problem we are studying. But on the other hand, we have to manage the expectation from a more pragmatic perspective in the business, producing something that is usable. Our end user is the business. So this tension requires a trade-off. You have to simplify things in order to make it understandable. Bearing in mind that, that's one quote I like, there is a limit to the extent you can reduce complexity and simplify without losing the meaning of what you are doing. So it's true, they ask us to make things simple, but not simpler. This is one aspect. On the other hand, if you are not able to make it simple enough to make it understandable by the end user, there is a chance that yourself you are not really understanding completely what you are doing, which is a challenge for our speakers probably today afterwards. So how we can manage this tension? On one side, we want things simple, meaningful, covering what the business is expecting, and on the other side, we want to be scientifically sound and rigorous. We have three ideas, which is not really new, but is good to bear it in mind. First of all, being parsimonious in the way we do our research. We start our work by considering large data sets, messy data, complex surveys. What we want to obtain from there is filter out the relevant information and be able to condense in the smallest number of variables all the information, the most information we can gather through the data we have collected on the field. Once you've done that, it's not the end of the story, because what you want to guarantee is that your findings can be general enough and generalizable enough to be applied to several other contexts within our ecosystem, but also to other ecosystems, and be able to monitor through time. This means being stable. And for business purposes, stability implies scalability of the approach. A third point, once you have a model which you think is stable and parsimonious, it has to pass a third test. It has to be useful for something. We're talking about economic models here. So what we want to have is a model and variables we use as metrics who have proved to be related somewhat to economic performance. In the agricultural case, we talk about agricultural productivity or business performance in case of the entrepreneurs. And we want these metrics to be actionable in the sense that they can be enacted by management and embedded to appropriate management practices. So at the end, if all these three conditions are fulfilled, what you want to obtain at the end is like an orchestra, all these metrics playing together on a common single bottom line. This is the way we consider holistic performance. All these metrics non-monetized all together, playing all together, allowing us to understand how to measure, manage, and remunerate each of the capitals we are dealing with according to its own type. So this is so much about the intentions, the objectives, and the criteria we applied to develop our metrics.